We're back with Team Rising. We got Colin and Lauren in the house today. So an interesting moment unfolded with our friends over at CNBC the other day. Jim Cramer in particular was pretty freaked out about the idea of an Elizabeth Warren presidency. Let's take a look.
I don't know what's going to happen. Look, I've got to tell you, when you get off the desk and you talk to executives, they're more fearful of her winning. I mean, I've never heard anybody say, look, she's got to be stopped.
She's got to be stopped. I mean, like, it's hilarious that they're so worried about this, but it's also interesting to me, Colin, like, why are they so worried about Warren and not in particular Bernie when he would go even further and, you know, famously welcomes their hatred?
Yeah, look, I think Bernie has been steady and hasn't grown a lot. He hasn't really, sank much in the polls. He's pretty steady. Yeah. She's the one with the momentum right now, and that's what's making them nervous. But if I'm Jim Cramer, I don't say that on TV because that's only going to fuel her momentum in a Democratic
she tweeted it out.
No, her social media is on point, and that was a perfect
I'm Elizabeth Warren, and I endorse this.
Yes.
I approve this message.
Yeah.
I mean, the main thing here, what is interesting, Lauren, is how oblivious these guys have been for so long. I mean, Jim Cramer's been a moron for a long time, but I mean, the fact that he would go on TV and act this way,
he was completely wrong about the financial collapse, for example.
There's so many things going back so many years, but I think it does show just how out of touch some of these Wall Street people are whenever it comes to this populist movement, which is shocking because, I mean, we had 2016, which was already a repudiation of this type of politics. What do you think?
Yeah, the way I'm looking at this is Jim Cramer and Wall Street, he is actually reflecting what Wall Street is saying, right? Yeah. And most of Wall Street is just kind of backing off, and they're like, we're not gonna make any calls and get all riled up or weigh in until there is some sort of certainty in this race and it's way too early. Yeah. They're like that generally with politics. What scares them about Warren is she's a known entity at this point because she's been a thorn in their side in the Senate, and as far as what she's been trying to do with establishing the CFPB and like a bunch of other regulatory and the bills, and so she's changed the conversation for big banks in a large way, and that's what makes them scared.
But I have another theory about why they're worried about Warren and not so much Bernie. I mean, I think you're right. The media narrative in particular has been Warren's on the rise, Warren's the threat, et cetera. But also, like, Warren's base of support is affluent white liberals. These guys know affluent white liberals. So they see people in their own circle who are supporting Elizabeth Warren, and they're like, oh my God. Whereas Bernie Sanders' coalition is mostly like Walmart workers. They don't know those people. They're not interacting with them, so they don't see his support as much of a threat because it's not as adjacent to the world that they live in.
I also think, look, Bernie, a lot of Bernie's, momentum has been just talking in generalities, and Elizabeth Warren seems a lot more practically able to get bills that would rein the banks in.
I don't know if that's true.
Words.
I mean, Sanders has put out a lot of quote-unquote plans as well, and been very specific on Medicare for all.
I think it's a matter of coverage.
I also think she's viewed as being able to actually get those things done in a practical manner.
That has definitely been the portrayal. That's been the media portrayal.
She has done this. I think the way it is that what you're getting to is right, which is Bernie's like, let's burn down the banks, basically. And they're like, oh, well, we've been hearing this type of stuff forever. And Elizabeth Warren comes out with like a 30-point plan that their analysts can actually put together and be like, this is how much it will destroy our balance sheet. And that's something that they go, oh my God, this could actually become a reality.
Yeah, ultimately, and also from their perspective, they're like, we've already taken a lot of steps since the financial crisis to strengthen our systems and make sure that we're safe again and that we're reliable and that people can believe in us. And she's coming in with more bills and more regulation and more policies that they think are redundant to a degree that are just business killers, not necessarily helping.
The banks are bigger than ever. Consumer debt is higher than ever. But when they go to their homes in the Hamptons, they go to that monogram shop where they sell the cups with the candidates' names, and Elizabeth Warren's cups are sold out in the Hamptons. Like, that'll freak you out right there.
Absolutely.
Another interesting development out of California regarding Uber and Lyft in particular. So those two companies really rely on classifying their employees as contractors to essentially skirt labor law and not have to provide them with the benefits they would otherwise be required to if they were classified as employees. California just passed a law that would mandate that those employees be properly classified as employees, not contractors. Lauren, what do you think? I mean, what do you think this means? How do you think Uber and Lyft respond?
Yeah, so I'd be interested to read the details of the bill, just because is it specific just to Uber and Lyft and ride sharing, or as some reports suggest, that it's going to be broader implications to the entire gig economy? Like, look,
it's broader implications. I mean, it can't be written specifically, but those are clearly the entities that are mostly targeted.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what's kind of messed up, is like this is set up just like TaskRabbit or dog walking apps or other things to connect people with resources, with people with needs. So I mean, if they are the connecting app, how can you? I mean, to me, that's actually a detriment to the worker, because the idea is that this is supposed to be a second job, or it's supposed to be just something that you can pick up on the side.
Well, that was part of the issue, right? Which is that Uber ultimately and Lyft, people did end up going full time, and when you do go full time, well, there's a lot of problems that are associated with.
But that's their personal choice.
It is and it isn't. I mean, in terms of taxi regulation and all those other things.
Well, and when you're in the low-wage economy, you don't have a lot of personal choice. So yes, what you said is exactly what Uber and Lyft say, but what some courts have said and what California is now saying is when you have this much control over a person, whether you want them to be or not, whether it is beneficial to your business model or not, they are employees who are subject to the same labor law rules and protections as employees normally should be.
Yeah, and look, I think this is a broader question for the gig economy that is kind of reflective of how the economy is changing in general, especially for younger people. Right now, we don't know where these people are going to be with benefits, and I actually think it's a huge opportunity for labor to reassert themselves into a conversation across the board in the United States and say, hey, you do need protections, and that's why we were formed here. If they're smart enough to take advantage of it.
Well, and by the way, if you're an independent contractor, you can't unionize. I mean, that's part of this too.
That is part of it.
That's definitely part of it. I think a real thing is that, Lauren, we were sold that idea of the dog walker, the college student who wants to make extra money. But then the problem was that it also disrupted and it destroyed a lot of these businesses, which honestly, rightfully should have been destroyed. Taxis were terrible. We all hated taxis. And that's one thing that nobody really talks about, which is like taking taxis was terrible. It was a horrible experience. However, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try and set up some sort of worker protection. But you're right, we need to think very carefully, because you don't want to destroy whatever the next type of gig economy, or you don't want to go after Airbnb, which is something that's been a net benefit to the consumer.
Or, if I'm Uber, then you're saying that I have to treat all of these employees as full-time. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to put restrictions on the amount of hours that people can work, so then they are definitively part-time, and this is definitively a second or third job. And then that's detrimental to the worker, because they don't have the flexibility to do what makes sense for their families.
They are very much in favor of this shift. And you're right, there may be, consequences that people aren't thinking through. We'll have to see how it plays out. But, the bottom line for me, Colin, is that if your big disruption essentially relies on skirting labor law, then you don't have a business model. You have a fraud.
Yeah, your disruption is based on lower labor costs that is not actually legal. However, I think it's also important to say that neither Lyft nor Uber have made a profit yet, so they still haven't figured out what their business model is. I mean, they're losing $3 to $5 billion a year.
They both lost $3 to $5 billion. They collectively lost $8 billion last year.
So very popular, but completely funded by outside investors.
It's venture capital.
It's venture capital.
Basically, you're taking a cheaper ride because a venture capitalist is paying for it. Now I'm going to take advantage of that.
I'm Elizabeth Warren, and I approve
that day comes. Until that day
comes. Until they pull the plug.
I'm here.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Next, yesterday's big news was the resignation, or the firing, depending on who you ask, of the Trump administration's National Security Advisor, John Bolton.
As with everything, we got some thoughts about what that means and where the administration might go from here. Stay tuned for more Rising.